"You don't belong here, Cross." That was the first thing I heard, barked across the barracks loud enough to make every head turn. Boots scuffed against the floor. Someone laughed, and I felt my ears burn. The laughter wasn't friendly. It was sharp, like knives bouncing off steel walls. "Farm boy," another voice added. "Bet you can't even carry your own ruck." I stood there with my second-hand duffel, the strap cutting into my shoulder, staring at the row of bunks lined with perfect sheets. Every eye on me said the same thing. "You won't last a week." And I thought for a second maybe they were right. The smell of disinfectant stung the air, mixed with boot polish and sweat. Sergeant Miller stormed in, his voice cutting the room in half. "Weakest link always breaks first," he barked, his finger jabbing straight at my chest. The barracks went quiet. The silence was worse than the insults, because in that moment it felt like everyone agreed with him. I swallowed hard and shifted my weight, wishing I could disappear into the floor. A couple of recruits chuckled under their breath, the kind of laugh you don't forget. One of them, Harris, tall and broad-shouldered, smirked like he'd just been handed his favorite toy. I'd just become his entertainment for the cycle. That night I unpacked in silence. Harris tossed his boots onto my bunk, dirt clinging to the soles, daring me to say something. I didn't. I just wiped the sheets clean and set them straight again. Across the room, I caught Corporal Ramirez's eyes for a split second. He wasn't laughing. He wasn't helping either, but there was something in the way he looked, like he'd seen this before. Then he turned away, his jaw tight, and I was alone again. I told myself not to care, but the sting stayed lodged in my chest. The first morning formation was worse. We stood in the cold, breath fogging in the dark, boots lined sharp against the pavement. My uniform hung loose. I hadn't had the money to get it properly tailored. Miller's voice thundered over the cadence. "Eyes forward! No slack! No weakness!" Then he stopped in front of me, his face close enough that I could smell the coffee on his breath. "Cross," he spat, dragging my name out like it was dirt in his mouth. "You think this is 4-H Club? You think you're feeding chickens out here? You are going to break." My throat was dry, but I managed to answer. "No, Sergeant." The others snickered. I wanted to disappear, but I stood there anyway. In the mess hall, I sat at the end of the table. My tray was a mess of powdered eggs and rubbery bacon. Harris and his buddies slid in across from me, grinning. "Don't choke on that, farm boy," he said loud enough for half the hall to hear. He smacked my tray, spilling juice into my lap. Laughter erupted again. I froze, gripping the spoon like it was the only thing tethering me to the room. No one defended me. They just kept eating. Ramirez walked by, eyes flicking to the mess, but he didn't say a word. He just set an extra carton of milk on my tray without looking at me and kept walking. It was nothing. But in that moment, it felt like the only crack of light in the whole building. Everywhere I went, the pressure followed me. In PT, Harris sprinted past and yelled, "Keep up, country boy." In the barracks, others whispered bets on when I'd quit. I tried to ignore it, but every word stuck, layering on top of the last. At night, when the lights went out and the room filled with snores and restless shifting, I pulled my brother's dog tags from under my shirt. The metal was cold against my skin, and I held them tight. He'd been stronger than me, braver. He never came home. I swore I wouldn't quit, not when he never got the chance to keep going. One evening after a brutal day of drills, I slipped out to the track while the others relaxed. The sky was a dull orange, the air heavy with sweat and dust. My boots pounded against the asphalt, slower than the cadence we sang in the mornings, but steady. My legs ached, my lungs burned, but I kept running. Each step was a promise. I will not be the weakest link. I will not break. What I didn't know then was that Ramirez was watching from the bleachers, silent, arms crossed. He didn't say anything, not yet, but he saw me, and that was the beginning, the start of something none of us expected. The jokes, the humiliation, the way Miller's words cut deep, those would become fuel. I didn't realize it then, but every insult was sharpening me for a moment that would flip everything upside down. Harris, Miller, even Ramirez. They had no idea what was coming. And honestly, neither did I. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next chapters of this journey. The rain never stopped that week. It hammered the asphalt, filled the ditches, soaked our uniforms until they clung like armor made of mud. We were out there on the PT field, lined up like scarecrows. In the storm, and the sergeants didn't care. If anything, they seemed to enjoy it. Harris leaned close to me between push-ups, his voice a sharp hiss drowned by the rain. "Farm boy's drowning. Somebody throw him afloat." Laughter rippled down the line. My arms shook, mud sliding beneath my palms. Every second felt like a dare to quit. I pressed harder into the ground. I would not give them the satisfaction. By chow time, I smelled like wet canvas and sweat. I carried my tray down the long line of tables, the room buzzing with voices and clattering forks. Harris and his crew spotted me instantly. "Hey, Cross," one called out. "Heard the cows back home miss you. Want me to get you some grass?" His buddy laughed so hard his milk spilled across the table. I lowered my head and kept walking, sitting at the end where no one wanted to be. The eggs were cold, the potatoes chalky, but I shoveled them down fast. Halfway through, Harris's hand smacked the edge of my tray. Food splattered across the table and into my lap. The hall roared. I froze, fists tight around the fork, but said nothing. Across the room, I saw Ramirez watching. He didn't speak, didn't move, just tapped a finger on his coffee cup. A small rhythm, steady, like a quiet reminder. Stay calm. I wiped the mess and finished what was left. Nights were the worst. The barracks smelled of polish and damp socks. The bunks lined up tight. Jokes floated through the dark. Little stabs aimed my way. Won't last till Sunday. Back to the farm before graduation. I lay still, staring at the ceiling, gripping my brother's dog tags under the blanket. Their edges dug into my palm. I whispered his name in the dark, promising him I wouldn't break. When the snores grew steady, I slipped from my bunk. The moonlight stretched across the concrete floor as I knelt by my rifle. I stripped it down blindfolded, fingers tracing each piece like old friends. Over and over, until the motions blurred into instinct. Sometimes I thought I heard footsteps at the door, but when I looked up, no one was there. Once, though, I caught Ramirez leaning in the shadows, arms folded. He said nothing, just gave a single nod and disappeared. That nod carried me for weeks. The ruck march nearly finished me. 30 pounds strapped to my back, boots grinding into the dirt road, rain beating down again. Harris jogged ahead, laughing with his crew. My shoulders screamed, blisters raw against the canvas straps. "Pick it up, Cross!" Sergeant Miller's voice cracked through the air like thunder. "You drag this squad down, I'll drag you out." I pushed harder, lungs burning, vision swimming. My legs threatened to fold with every step, but I didn't stop. I finished last, stumbling across the line as the others clapped each other on the back. Harris smirked, sweat shining on his face. "Didn't think you'd crawl all the way." I collapsed against a post, chest heaving. Miller glanced at me, something different in his eyes. Not approval, but the faintest recognition. He didn't say a word, just moved on. That silence felt louder than any insult. Days blurred into each other. Drills, punishments, endless mud. My body changed first. Muscles hardened, shoulders squared. The pain became familiar, almost welcome. But what surprised me was how the silence inside shifted too. The mockery still stung, but it no longer cut as deep. I began to hear cadence in my head when I ran alone, steps syncing to the rhythm my brother once taught me. Left, 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 right, left. It carried me further than my legs thought possible. One evening, Harris cornered me outside the showers. Steam drifted from the tiled room, boots squeaking against the floor. "You're making us look bad," he sneered, shoving my shoulder. "You think staying quiet makes you tough? Say something." My fists itched to rise, but I clenched them at my sides. "I don't need to say anything," I muttered. His smirk faltered for half a breath. Then he shoved past me, laughing for his buddy's sake. But I saw the crack, and so did Ramirez, who stepped from the hallway shadows a moment later. He didn't smile, but he handed me a protein bar, quick and casual, as if it meant nothing. To me, it meant everything. The real test came on an obstacle course in the middle of another storm. The mud was a trap, ropes slick as ice, walls towering over us. Harris charged first, hauling himself up with ease. I followed, slipping twice, my palms burning. Laughter echoed behind me. Cross can't climb a wall higher than a cow fence. Miller's whistle cut sharp, barking for speed. I dug deep, pulled until my muscles screamed, and threw myself over. By the time I hit the ground, my knees buckled, but I stood. I forced myself forward, obstacle after obstacle, never letting go. At the rope crawl, Harris stalled. His boots slipped, his body dangling as he cursed. Without thinking, I dropped to the mud beneath him, bracing his fall, pushing him back up until he scrambled to safety. He didn't thank me. Not then. He just stared, breath ragged, as I pulled myself through the rope behind him. The squad went quiet. Even Miller stopped his whistle. Something had shifted. That night, for the first time, no jokes flew across the barracks. The room was heavy with a silence no one wanted to break. I lay in my bunk, soaked in exhaustion, but wide awake. The dog tags pressed into my chest, warmer now, like they carried new weight. I realized something. I didn't have to be the fastest, the loudest, or the strongest. I just had to endure. And endurance I had in spades. What I didn't know was that this shift, this tiny crack in their armor, was only the beginning. Because soon the same voices that mocked me would have to rely on me in ways they couldn't imagine. And when that moment came, the whole balance of power would flip forever. It was supposed to be just another training day. The sun was brutal, the air thick with dust and sweat, and every one of us was dragging after 2 weeks of nonstop drills. Sergeant Miller's voice cut through the yard like a whip. Today's field exercise decides who's ready for war and who's still playing farmer. His eyes lingered on me, letting the insult hang in the air. Harris grinned wide, clapping one of his buddies on the back. Guess Cross is packing for the bus home tonight. The others laughed, but it sounded nervous, like even they were starting to doubt the words. I kept my head down, gripping my rifle, saying nothing. We moved out to the mock combat zone, a stretch of woods and scrub designed to mimic chaos. Blank rounds, smoke grenades, radio chatter. It always felt a little too real. My boots sank in soft earth as we spread into formation. Miller barked the plan: navigate the course, seize the objective, bring every man back. Simple on paper. But nothing in training ever went simple, especially not today. The whistle blew and everything exploded. Smoke canisters hissed, gunfire echoed, bodies dropped into cover. Harris led the charge, yelling, "Move up! Let's go!" I followed, low to the ground, scanning the trees. My heart slammed against my ribs, not from fear, but from the weight of knowing every eye waited for me to fail. We pushed forward until the crack of a weapon jam echoed behind us. A machine gunner cursed, slamming the receiver. The squad froze, pinned without cover fire. Harris spun around. "Fix it," he barked, panic leaking through his voice. The gunner fumbled, hands shaking. Miller's roar boomed. "Cross! Get on it!" A test, another setup. I knew it. If I failed, I'd be finished. I dropped beside the weapon, mud caking my sleeves. My hands moved fast, smoother than I expected. Clear the chamber, strip the bolt. Clean, reassemble. Click, locked. Ready. The whole thing took seconds. Silence fell over the squad, even as smoke billowed around us. Harris blinked, stunned, before snapping back to shout, "Fire! Fire!" The gun rattled, rounds spraying down range, and the squad surged forward again. I stayed low, my pulse racing. Miller's eyes burned holes into me, but he didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Everyone had seen. Minutes later, the course threw its next punch. Harris, cocky as ever, sprinted too far ahead, ignoring signals. Suddenly, the crack of simulated sniper fire dropped him flat. He wasn't hit for real, but the exercise marked him down. He cursed, pounding the dirt. "Don't you dare leave me!" His voice carried, raw with fear. The squad hesitated. Rules said to carry every man, no matter what. Harris was twice my size, gear and all. I didn't think. I just ran. My legs screamed, my back on fire as I heaved him up and dragged him behind cover. "What the hell are you doing, Cross?" he gasped, stunned. I didn't answer. I just kept pulling until he was safe. When I finally dropped him, chest burning, the squad stared like they didn't recognize me. Even Harris was speechless. For once, his mouth failed him. We regrouped at the rally point, sweat dripping, chests heaving. Miller paced in front of us, jaw tight. "One of you nearly cost this team the exercise," he growled, eyes fixed on Harris. The squad shifted uncomfortably. Harris opened his mouth to defend himself but closed it again. Miller turned to me, his glare colder than ice. "And one of you surprised the hell out of me." For a heartbeat, the only sound was the rustle of leaves in the wind. He didn't praise me outright, but he didn't need to. The look on every recruit's face said enough. Something had cracked wide open. Later, back at the barracks, the air buzzed. Harris sat on his bunk, silent, staring at the floor. His crew didn't laugh that night. Nobody did. I sat alone, same as always, but this time the silence felt different. It wasn't filled with mockery. It was filled with questions they were too proud to ask. Ramirez walked in during lights out, his boots quiet on the tile. He stopped at my bunk, looking down with that steady calm of his. "Where'd you learn that?" he asked quietly. For a moment I thought about lying, brushing it off, but the weight on my chest was too heavy. "My brother," I said, voice low. "He was a ranger. He used to bring the manuals home. I memorized them, practiced until my hands bled." Ramirez studied me, eyes sharp. "And where's he now?" I swallowed hard. "Didn't make it back." The silence stretched. Ramirez finally nodded once. "Then you're carrying him with you." And he walked away. My throat tightened, but for the first time in months, it wasn't from shame. It was something closer to pride. The next morning, the tone had shifted. Harris didn't smirk when I passed. He didn't say a word at all. During PT, when I lagged on push-ups, nobody laughed. The squad still didn't cheer me on, but the cruel edge was gone. The looks they gave me weren't scorn anymore. They were something else, uneasy respect. Even Miller kept his comments clipped, watching me differently, like he was waiting to see what came next. For the first time, I wasn't just the target. I was part of the story unfolding. But the real shock came later that week, during a night raid simulation. The field was black, only moonlight slicing through the trees. We moved in silence, rifles up, sweat cold on our necks. Halfway through, comms broke down. Orders were lost in the static. Panic crept into the ranks. Harris stumbled again, nearly blowing our cover. I caught his arm, steadying him without a word. The squad followed my lead, eyes darting to me in the dark. Step by step, we reached the objective. When the whistle finally blew to end the drill, we were still intact. No one said it outright, but they all knew. I had led them through. Not Harris, not Miller. Me. Back at camp, Miller called us to formation. His face was stone, but his words carried weight. "Private Cross," he barked. "What the hell got into you?" My chest tightened, waiting for the insult. But then his tone shifted, sharp but different. "Whatever it is, keep it. This squad needs it." The platoon fell silent. Harris lowered his head, jaw clenched. Ramirez gave me the slightest nod from the back. In that moment, everything flipped. I wasn't the weakest link anymore. I was the one holding the chain together. That night, I lay in my bunk, staring at the ceiling, dog tags cold against my skin. For months, I'd carried them as a reminder not to quit. Now they felt heavier, like they carried more than memory. They carried expectation. My brother had fought with courage until the end. Now somehow it was my turn to finish what he couldn't. I closed my eyes and whispered the promise again. I will not break. And for the first time, I believed it. The change didn't happen overnight, but it was impossible to ignore. The same guys who once laughed every time I tripped in the mud now kept their voices down when I walked into the chow hall. The whispers were different too. Not farm boy, not weak link. Now it was, "Did you see him clear that jam?" Or, "He carried Harris like he weighed nothing." They didn't say it to my face, but I heard it. And Harris, the loudest of them all, had gone quiet. He ate fast, kept his head down, and when our eyes met across the table, his smirk was gone. Shame had taken its place, but shame doesn't just vanish. It burns. And that night in the barracks, he finally cracked. "Don't get comfortable, Cross," he muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. The room went still. "You had one lucky day. Doesn't change what you are." I sat on my bunk polishing my boots. My heart thudded, but I didn't look up. The silence dragged until Ramirez's voice broke through. Calm. Even. Maybe it's not luck, he said from the corner, leaning against a locker. The room shifted. Harris froze. Nobody laughed this time. He just clenched his fists and turned away. That was the first time Ramirez spoke for me out loud, and it shook the whole barracks more than any fight could have. The drills got harder after that. Miller pushed us like he wanted to break us all. Sprints until legs gave out, obstacle runs in the rain, rifle drills until our fingers blistered. He kept his eye on me more than before, waiting for cracks. Cross, you gonna collapse or what? He barked during one ruck march. My body screamed yes, but I gritted out, no, Sergeant. He studied me, then turned his wrath on the rest. Then none of you collapse either. For once, I wasn't the example of weakness. I was the standard. That hit harder than the pack on my shoulders. Still, the tension with Harris lingered. One afternoon, we were paired for a buddy exercise. He strapped into the harness. I clipped in beside him. He leaned close, whispering, "Don't think I owe you anything." His breath was hot with bitterness. I answered steady, "I didn't carry you for a thank you." His eyes darted, searching for anger, but I gave him none. We finished the drill in silence, and though he never admitted it, something in him cracked further that day. The real explosion came during inspection. The barracks smelled like polish and sweat, boots lined up like soldiers themselves. Miller stormed down the row, white gloves snapping against bunks. When he reached Harris, he ripped the sheets back, revealing wrinkles. "Unacceptable!" he roared. Harris stood frozen. Miller turned, scanning for the next weak spot, and his eyes locked on me. My gut clenched. "Cross," he barked. "Let's see if your farm hands can fold a bed tighter than this clown." Every eye snapped my way. My pulse hammered, but I moved. I stripped my bunk in seconds, corners tucked sharp, blanket tight enough to bounce a coin. Miller slammed his glove down. The coin clinked high, bounced once, and spun on the surface without falling. Silence swallowed the room. Miller's jaw twitched. Then he turned on Harris. "Maybe you should take notes from the farm boy." The barracks erupted in a low murmur. Harris's face flushed deep red. Mine burned too, but for a different reason. For the first time, I wasn't humiliated in front of everyone. Someone else was, and the power flipped so fast it left the air heavy. After inspection, Harris cornered me outside, fist balled. "You think you're better than me now?" His voice shook with rage. I looked him dead in the eye. "No," I said quietly. "I think I finally proved I belong here." He opened his mouth, but no words came. His fist dropped, shoulders sagging. He walked away, and that silence, that surrender, was louder than any punch. That night, the whole platoon felt different. In the chow hall, nobody knocked my tray. On the PT field, no one laughed when I lagged. Instead, one recruit muttered, "Come on, Cross, keep moving." It wasn't encouragement, not really, but it wasn't ridicule either. It was something new. Inclusion. And it hit me harder than the insults ever did. Ramirez found me later, sitting on the bleachers after lights out, staring at the stars above the training field. He sat beside me quiet for a while. Finally, he said, "You know, the ones who talk loudest are usually the ones most scared." I frowned. "Scared of what?" He shrugged. "Scared someone will see through them. You didn't break, so Harris had to." His words sank deep. I thought back to every laugh, every shove, every cruel whisper. They weren't just trying to break me. They were trying to hide their own cracks, and now those cracks were showing. The next morning, Miller pulled us into formation. His voice thundered as always, but his words were different. "Some of you learned what brotherhood means this week. Some of you learned what happens when you stop looking out for just yourself." His gaze swept the line and landed on me. "Private Cross," he barked. My chest tightened. Then he nodded once, sharp. "Not the weakest link anymore." The formation went dead silent. My throat locked, but inside something surged. A mixture of relief, pride, and a strange sadness. My brother never heard those words, but I did, and I carried them for both of us. From that day, the dynamic shifted. Harris wasn't the leader anymore, not even in whispers. The squad followed orders. but their eyes sometimes flicked toward me. Ramirez stopped watching from the shadows. He started standing beside me. And Miller? He never softened, but his insults no longer carried venom. They were tests, not executions. My place had changed, and everyone knew it. That night I lay in my bunk, dog tags cold against my chest. For months I had fought to survive, to endure. Now for the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was becoming part of something bigger. And I knew one thing for sure. The hardest fight wasn't proving them wrong. It was proving myself right. And the real test was still ahead. Graduation week crept up on us like a storm you could feel in your bones before you saw the clouds. The air on base was different. Boots were shinier, uniforms pressed sharper, and even the usual grumbling in the chow hall softened. Everyone knew the end was near. For me, it was a blur of long nights, cold mornings, and a weight in my chest that hadn't lifted since the first day I walked into the barracks. But this time, it wasn't fear or humiliation pressing me down. It was something heavier, the question of whether I had finally earned my place here. On the last night before the ceremony, Harris came over to my bunk. For months he had mocked me, shoved me, laughed at me in front of everyone. Now he stood with his hands shoved deep in his pockets, eyes fixed on the floor. "You saved me out there," he muttered. His voice cracked like it hurt him to say it. I didn't answer right away. The silence stretched until he looked up. "I was wrong about you." That was it. No big speech, no handshake. Just that. He turned and walked off before I could reply. I lay there staring at the ceiling, my brother's dog tags cold against my chest, and whispered, "You hear that? Took him long enough." The morning of graduation, the parade ground gleamed under the sun. Rows of recruits stood at attention, boots lined sharp against the pavement. Families filled the bleachers, flags snapping in the wind. My stomach churned, not from nerves but from something deeper, like I was carrying every insult, every late-night run, every drop of sweat to this final moment. Sergeant Miller strode out, his voice booming over the crowd. "This cycle tested each of you. Some broke, some bent, and some proved they belonged." His eyes scanned the formation, stopping on me for a heartbeat. He gave the smallest nod, quick and sharp, before moving on. Nobody else noticed, but I felt it like a weight lifted from my chest. After the ceremony, when the family swarmed the field, I hung back, no one waiting for me. Ramirez found me near the bleachers, leaning against a post. He studied me for a moment before saying, "Your brother would have been proud." My throat tightened, and I had to look away before answering. "I hope so." Ramirez nodded once. "No, I know so." He didn't stay long, just left me standing there with the wind snapping the flags overhead. But that was enough, more than enough. That night the barracks were quieter than ever. Harris approached me again, this time with no smirk, no sarcasm. He sat on the edge of the bunk across from mine and asked, "Why didn't you ever fight back?" I thought about it, then said, "Because winning an argument doesn't keep a squad alive. Discipline does." He nodded slowly, letting the words sink in, then stood and walked away without another word. For once, he didn't need the last laugh. Later, when the lights went out, I slipped outside. The night was cool, the air heavy with the smell of cut grass and dust. I jogged the track alone, boots pounding in rhythm, my breath steady. I could almost hear my brother's voice in the cadence, pushing me forward. Left, 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 right, left. The flags flapped overhead, catching the moonlight, and I felt something shift inside me. Not weakness, not shame, strength. Silent, steady strength. The kind you don't need to shout about, because it speaks loud enough on its own. I wasn't the farm boy anymore. I wasn't the weakest link. I was a soldier, and I knew deep down that was only the beginning. The last image I want you to hold is this: a quiet parade ground, the American flag rippling in the breeze, and Private Cross standing alone beneath it. No applause, no speeches, just Sergeant Miller, the man who once barked insults at him, walking past, slowing for half a second, and giving a single sharp nod. That nod wasn't just respect, it was an acknowledgement. The weakest link had become the one holding the chain together. Cross didn't smile. He didn't raise his arms. He just stood steady, the flag overhead, and in his silence, the message was louder than any shout. And that's the lesson we carry forward. Life will hand you injustice. You will be mocked, doubted, even broken down until the world believes you've got nothing left to give. But strength isn't about the noise you make. It's about standing firm when everything in you wants to quit. Actions speak louder than words, and Private Cross proved that by enduring every insult until the truth could no longer be denied. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, but only if you refuse to let bitterness consume you. Brotherhood isn't about liking each other. It's about caring one another when the mission demands it. And dignity? Dignity is the quiet fire you hold inside, the one no one can take away. So if you've ever felt underestimated, if you've carried weight no one else could see, remember Cross's story. You don't need to scream to be heard. You just need to keep going until the silence itself speaks for you. If this story resonates with you, share your thoughts or your own journey in the comments below. Hit the like button if you felt the power in these words, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story we walk through together. Until then, stand steady, stay strong, and know you're never alone in this fight.